Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Before beginning Maseches Eruvin, I highly recommend listening to the 3 introductory classes on the Masechta, which you can find on our YouTube channel. Specifically, today's sugya refers to the 3rd introduction, which is the concept of carrying within a mavoi. So briefly, houses in the days of the Gemara, you had multiple houses which opened into one courtyard called the Chatzer. You had multiple courtyards which opened into one mavoi or alley. Now, the courtyards were walled on all sides, and therefore they were halachically a reshus hayachid, both midaraisa and midarbanan. The mavoi, the alley, was walled either on 3 sides by the houses that surrounded on 3 sides, like a cul-de-sac, or it could be walled on 2 sides if it was a through street kind of mavoi. Now, the entrance to the mavoi, the 4th open side, was a reshus harabim. That is a main thoroughfare, at least 16 amos wide, which is used by many people. That's reshus harabim. If it was a through street, then you had reshus harabim on both ends of the mavoi. Now, the mavoi itself that we're discussing in our Mishnah is a mavoi sasam. That means that it's walled on 3 sides. Now, if the 4th side is halachically closed, then it's a reshus hayachid. What would make it halachically closed? If the gap, the 4th side, is either less than 10 amas, or it has a tzuras hapesach. It has a doorway, the form of a doorway, which means 2 door posts and a cross beam that close or enclose the 4th open side. Situation like that, the mavoi is reshus hayachid, midaraisa and midarbanan. However, it's still forbidden to carry within a midarbanan unless you have some kind of symbol to separate the mavoi from the reshus harabim. Chazal were afraid that since it's so similar to reshus harabim and it opens into reshus harabim, you'll end up carrying from the mavoi into reshus harabim if we allow you to carry within the mavoi itself. Now, what acceptable devices are there to set off the mavoi from the reshus harabim symbolically so that the Rabbanan allowed us to carry within the mavoi itself if it's a reshus hayachid? So it's either a beam running across the top of the entrance to the mavoi, that's the 4th open side, or it's a lechi, a side post standing along the side. According to Beis Hillel, you need one or the other. According to Misham, you need both, but that's not discussed here. And the question is, what is the halacha of the beam? That's what this Mishnah is about, and how wide can that opening be? So, first of all, how high can the beam be? The Mishnah quotes a machlokes. According to the Rabbanan, the language is as follows. If it's 20 amos or higher, you have to lower it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's okay. 20 amos or higher is fine. That's the first thing. Now, how wide can this last opening be? This 4th side, which is open, how wide can it be? So according to the Chachamim, if it's 10 amos wide or wider, then it's too wide. You got to shrink it. You have to build it close. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's okay. Even if it's 10 amos wide, it's fine. It's not a problem. Now, the Mishnah concludes by saying that if you have a Suras HaPesach, of course, the 4th side is closed, and you don't have to worry about it being too wide. Okay, now, the Gemara begins, and like usual, the Gemara first wants to clear up some linguistic issues here. The Gemara says, how come you tell me that if the beam is 20 amos high, you should lower it? What did you just say? If the beam is 20 amos high, it's puzzle. In Hilchos Sukkah, when we say a sukkah's schach is 20 amos high, the Mishnah says it's a puzzle. It doesn't say lower it. How come here you tell me how to fix it, and there you just say that it's no good? So the Gemara offers 2 answers to this. First answer, the Gemara says, because that's a dairaisa. If it's a halacha dairaisa, the sukkah is not a kosher sukkah, it's a puzzle sukkah, that's it. Over here, this entire creation is a rabbinical rule. The Rabbanan are saying this is what we want you to do. So they're telling you, if you did it 20 amos high, we want you to make it lower. We're saying what we want to do. We can't say it's a puzzle mavoi. A mavoi doesn't have any halacha that it could be puzzle. The Rabbanan said you have to put a beam there, so you got to put the beam lower. That's the first answer. The second approach is that when we were learning about the sukkah, there are many different halachas which we wanted to pack together as one, a number of different psulim. So we wanted to say puzzle at the end of the whole list. So that's why we said a whole list, and then we said puzzle on all of them, including if it's 20 amos high. Here, just one halacha. We're just saying that 20 amos is too high, so we could tell you, lower it. Meaning in sukkah, we couldn't say lower it if we were going to list other psulim which have nothing to do with lowering things. So therefore we had to say that it's possible. That was the only way we could combine all the halachos into one. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know, and this is going to be the primary discussion here, what is the source of this machokas? Where do the Rabbanan know that 20 amos high is too high, and where do Rabbi Yehuda know that it's not a problem? So the Gemara says they both derive it from the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, the Beis HaMikdash had besides for the wall that went around the entire yard, the Beis HaMikdash had a structure. That structure was made of a Heichal, that was the main building. That was what served as the Ohel Moed of the Beis HaMikdash, as it were. And the front of the Heichal was a larger, wider, and taller structure, which was very short. It wasn't short in height. It wasn't very deep. It was only 10 amos long, but it was very wide, and it was very tall. That was called the Ulam. Now, the question between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is which doorway do we look at? We know that the doorway of the Heichal is called a doorway. We have a pasuk that describes it, and it says V'samach yadei arosh karbana ushchatei pesach ohel moed. In describing a karbanos, it says that you shachted at the entrance to the ohel moed. Ohel moed refers to the tent, the structure of the Mishkan. But that very much parallels the Beis HaMikdash, the Heichal, in the Beis HaMikdash. So according to the Rabbanan, you got to use the doorway of the Heichal. That's what is called Heichal. That's what's called Ohel Moed, and that doorway was only 20 amos high. So if it's higher than that, then it's not called a doorway anymore. It's too big to be called a doorway. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it could be much larger because you can actually count the Ulam. You could look at the door of the Ulam. And the doorway of the Ulam was 40 amos high, and therefore it can go up to 40 amos high. Now, the Gemara says, how come Rabbi Yehuda says you could use the Ulam? So the Gemara first says because he considers the Ulam to be part of the Heichal, and therefore the Kedusha of the Ulam is the same as Heichal. When we say at the entrance, when we have the Psukim describing you could do something at the entrance to the Heichal, it could also be at the entrance to the Ulam, and therefore the pasuk is referring to the entrance to the Ulam just as much as the entrance to the Heichal, and therefore it's also called doorway, and it also counts for this halacha. Now, the Gemara has an alternate pshat in Rabbi Yehuda, not that the Ulam is considered to be the same Kedusha as the Heichal, but we have a different pasuk that actually calls the entrance to the Ulam itself a Pesach. It says, El Pesach Ulam Habayis. So you see that the entrance to the Ulam is called a Pesach. Pesach is a doorway. So the 40 amma high entrance is also called a doorway. That's fine. Now the Gemara says, what are the Rabbanan going to do with that pasuk? The Gemara answer is simple. The Rabbanan will say that it doesn't say El Pesach HaUlam. It says Pesach Ulam Habayis. That's referring to the doorway going from the Ulam into the Heichal. That's the 20 amma doorway. Of course that is called a Pesach. We agree to that. The doorway from the outside, from the Azara into the Ulam, that's not called a Pesach because that's too tall. That's 40 amos. Okay, the Gemara's next question is, hold on a second. We're trying to learn all this out of the pasuk that says Ushchatei Pesach Ohel Moed. You should shecht it at the door, but that's at the door of the Ohel Moed. That's in the Mishkan, in the Midbar. What does it have to do with the Ulam? How do you know that it applies to the Ulam and to the Heichal? Maybe it's only referring to the doorway to the Mishkan itself. The Gemara says, no, the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash are interchangeable, because you find that the word Mishkan is sometimes used to apply to the Beis HaMikdash, and the word Mikdash is sometimes used to apply to the Mishkan, therefore they're interchangeable. And we know this because there's another halacha in which we consider them to be interchangeable. So first let's explore that. That's a statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel that says if you shecht, you slaughter a carbon shlamim before the doors of the Heichal are opened in the morning, that's no good. That carbon is puzzle. Why? Because the Torah tells us you have to shecht it Pesach Ohel Moed. Pesach means a doorway, but it also means open. So you see that it has to be open. So Gemara says, hold on a second. You could ask the same question over there. How does Shmuel know to apply that to the Heichal? The Heichal is the Beis HaMikdash. But Shchatei Pesach Ohel Moed is only talking about the Mishkan. So obviously that this same answer is true there and it's true here. The terms Mishkan and Mikdash are interchangeable, and therefore any halacha which is said for the Ohel Moed also applies to the Heichal, and vice versa. Now the Gemara says, where do you see that the word Mishkan is used to refer to the Beis HaMikdash? The Gemara says, it's simple. Hashem, after the Mishkan was already built, Hashem says, "V'nosate is Mishkani b'saychechem." In the future, I will put my Mishkan within you. It's not referring to the Mishkan because the Mishkan was built already. He's saying, in the future, I will. That's referring to the Beis HaMikdash and calling it Mishkan. Now, where do you see that the Mishkan itself is called Mikdash? So the Gemara tries two attempts. The first attempt is because it says V'nasu hakahazam noisei hamikdash v'kimu zamishkan ad bayom, that Shevet Kahas, which carried the mikdash, set it up before the rest of Klal Yisrael arrived. This is when they were traveling to a new encampment. Gemara says, hold on a second. That's talking about Kahas. Kahas didn't carry the Mishkan. Kahas carried the Aron. So obviously there where it says mikdash, it's talking about the Aron. It's not talking about the Mishkan. So Gemara says, okay, so it's from here. V'asuli mikdash v'shechanti b'seicham. When instructing to build the Mishkan, the Torah calls it a mikdash. Make me a mikdash. Okay, next, the Gemara focuses on the machlokas about how wide a doorway could be. We'd seen that the Chachamim say it could be 10 amos, and Rabbi Yehuda says it can be wider than that. The Gemara says, hold on a second. They both have a problem here. When describing the Mishkan, you have a doorway that was 30 amos wide. Where do you see that? Well, the courtyard of the Mishkan, the Chatzar, was 100 amos long and 50 amos wide. That 50 amos, those two 50 amma ends, one end was a solid wall, the other end had just two pieces of wall stretching towards the center from the corners, and the center was open. Now those two pieces of wall that make up the corners, this is again on the 50 amma side, the width, the end, those two pieces of wall stretching towards the center were each 15 amos, as is described explicitly, and therefore since it's a 50 amma length, and you got 15 amos on one end and 50 amos on the other end, so the center of it was obviously 20 amos. You had a 20 amma gap there. So you see you can have a width and a space, an opening of 20 amos, and it's still called a doorway. Where do you see that it's called a doorway? Because the pasuk says, Pesach Shar HaChatzar, the doorway to the gate of the Chatzar. So Gemara has two answers here. The Gemara says, first of all, it doesn't say that it's a Pesach. It just says Pesach Shar HaChatzar. It's a Pesach of the gate. We need to find somewhere where you just call it a doorway, not you call it a doorway of a thing. That doesn't count. The second answer is that really that gap wasn't 20 amos. The gap was actually only 10 amos. Actually, the gap, we don't know how much the gap was. The gap is not specified. When it says that the two pieces of wall on the sides of the gap were 15 amos, it doesn't mean that they were 15 amos wide, leaving only 20 amos for the gap. It means that they were 15 amos high. And it doesn't specify how wide they were, and therefore we don't know how big the gap is. And says, what? How can you tell me they were 15 amos high? The Psukim say clearly that they were 5 amos high. So Gemara has an answer here. It's not clear what the girsa is. We'll go with Rashi's preferred girsa and Pshat. Rashi says that when it says they were 5 amos high, it means that they were 5 amos higher than the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach itself was 10 amos high, and these walls were 15 amos high, and therefore they stretched 5 amos higher than the Mizbeach. The point of that is that the Kohanim should be able to walk on the Mizbeach without being exposed to the rest of the Kahal. Okay, now the Gemara says, are you sure that Rabbi Yehuda really learns the halacha of how high or wide a doorway can be from the Ulam? I'm going to bring you a couple of proofs that he does not. First of all, the Gemara asks, if you look carefully at the words of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't really argue about how wide the doorway is allowed to be. He only says that it doesn't have to be 20 amos high, it could be higher, but it doesn't really say anything about the width. So Gemara says it's a problem, because if he's learning out of the Ulam, the width of the Ulam doorway was 20 amos, so he should say up to 20 amos wide is okay. So Gemara says, well, we have a different brisa where he says clearly that it can be wider than the 10 amos. So the Gemara says, well, why did he say it clearly in the Mishnah? The Gemara says he does. If you look at it carefully, he argues on both. He says that it's not that the Rabbanan say it has to be 20 amos wide, 20 amos high, it has to be lower than 20 amos high, and 10 amos wide, and Rabbi Yehuda is arguing, he's really arguing on both. He's not only arguing on the first part. Zimra says, okay, I have another proof that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn out of the entrance to the Ulam, and that's, we have this brisa that quotes the Machlokas, and it says, according to the Tanakhama, who's the Rabbanon, the Kaira, the crossbeam, can't be higher than 20 amos. You have to lower it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's okay up to 40 or 50 amos, it says, and according to Bar Kapara, up to 100 amos. So now, Bar Kapara I'm not worried about. He's obviously exaggerating. He's just saying a lot more than 20 amos, so fine. But according to the first version, where it's 40 or 50 amos, 40 amos is good. That's the height of the Ulam. But how could anybody possibly come up with Rabbi Yehuda holding a 50 amos? 50 amos is higher than the Ulam's doorway. So Gemara says, you're right, it's a mistake. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't learn out of the Ulam. Rabbi Yehuda, he learns from somewhere else. He holds that a standard royal doorway could be very high. It could be 40 amas, could be 50 amas. It's got nothing to do with the ulam. The reason why Rav said earlier, and that was the one who explained it, that he learns out of the ulam is because he was tripped up. He made a mistake when he saw a brisa that says the following statement. It says that a mavoi, meaning a crossbeam, which is higher than 20 amas above the height of the doorway of the heichal, should be lowered. So he said the doorway of the heichal is 20 amas. This is 20 amas higher than that, so that's 40 amas. So he thought that this must be because Rabbi Yehuda is learning from ulam, which is 40 amas, but it's not correct. He doesn't have any problem with the ulam. It's not learned from the ulam. He's learning from the standard kingly royal doorway, which could be 50 amas or even possibly higher than that. Okay, now the Gemara says, is it really true that the Rabbanon learned their halacha out of the doorway of the heichal? I'm bringing you two proofs that they do not learn from the heichal. First proof is, if they learn out of the doorway of the heichal, then they should require actual doors on the entrance to the mavoi, just like the heichal had doors. So Gemara says, no, the doors of the heichal weren't to make it a doorway. The doors of the heichal were so that they should be able to be closed and there should be tznius. The Kohanim's work should not be exposed to everyone to see. But it wasn't part of defining the doorway. It's a doorway without the doors. Okay, second question. We had seen that the halacha that if you have a tzuras haPesach, if you have a shape of a doorway, so then the fourth side of a mavi is considered closed, and you can carry within it, it's Rishus HaYachid completely, even if it's greater than 10 amas. 10 amas is without a tzuras haPesach. If you have tzuras haPesach, even if it's greater than the 10 amas wide, that's okay. But hold on a second. The doorway of the heichal was a tzuras haPesach, and it was 10 amas. That should therefore define for you, it shouldn't only define for you the size of a doorway, it should also define for you the maximum size of a tzuras haPesach. So Gemara says, well, this is Rav's opinion here, and Rav happens to hold that a tzuras haPesach can't be wider than a 10 amas, so if it's fine. We, who don't learn from the heichal, we don't hold like Rav, so we wouldn't be limited to this 10 amma wide tzuras haPesach.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.